How do you know when an empire is about to fall? Not when the last tower crumbles or when the last soldier flees the battlefield. Not even when the people riot or the markets crash. Collapse doesn't begin outside. Collapse begins in the unseen. It begins in the moment the last thread of truth is removed from the system. The moment the final soul who was holding the line quietly, invisibly, powerfully decides, "I'm done." That soul is what we call the dark chosen one. Not because they are evil, not because they dwell in shadows for pleasure, but because they entered the system knowing it was poisoned and chose to walk it anyway for the sake of awakening something buried so deep no one else dared to reach it. But what happens when even they walk away? That's what we're about to explore. And the answer is more real than most people are ready for. You see, we were never here to save the system. That's the first lie you've got to unlearn. We weren't sent to fix broken governments, uplift crumbling religions, or patch up dysfunctional families with spiritual duct tape. We were sent to witness, to remember, to hold the frequency of truth in environments steeped in denial. We were walking acupuncture needles in the flesh of collective karma. Wherever we went, shadows surfaced. Not because we were negative, but because we were so deeply tuned to what others refused to feel. We weren't sick, we were mirrors. And for a long time we stayed. We stayed in toxic relationships, corrupt institutions, stagnant communities. Not out of weakness, but because we were listening, watching, holding, waiting for the signal. And now that signal has come. The signal is silence. It's the kind that stretches across timelines. It doesn't scream. It doesn't flash. It simply arrives. And when it does, something inside the dark chosen one clicks. There's no drama, no announcement, just a deep inner knowing. My work here is done. And when that moment comes, we don't argue. We don't negotiate. We walk away, not out of anger, but out of precision. Because we know what most don't. The system wasn't built to be healed. It was built to drain. And we've poured lifetimes of energy into trying to hold it up. But now, we pull the plug. And when we do, the collapse begins. But let me be clear, this isn't about revenge. It's about resonance. When the last dark chosen one walks away, it's not a punishment. It's a recalibration. The system begins to fall because the frequency that was secretly holding it together, the frequency of embodied truth, is no longer present. Without that, all the illusions, all the manipulations, all the false light and toxic positivity have nothing to anchor to. They start turning on each other. The masks slip. The lies cannibalize themselves. And what was once a fortress of control becomes a house of mirrors collapsing under its own weight. You felt this, haven't you? Maybe not on a global scale yet, but in your own life. You stayed in a job and the energy was heavy. You left and suddenly the whole thing started unraveling. You stayed in a relationship, absorbing the pain, the projection, the blame. You left and the person spiraled. Not because you cursed them, but because you were the container. You were the anchor. And when you removed your presence, everything that was being held together by your unacknowledged power came undone. That wasn't a coincidence. That was your field. That was your shadow frequency. That was your role until it wasn't. So now the question is, how do you know if you're the last one? How do you know if you're the final thread holding something together that was never meant to last? The answer is unnervingly simple. You feel done, not exhausted, not bitter, just done. There's no charge, just emptiness. A calm, neutral knowing that staying one more second would be a betrayal of your soul. That's the mark of the last dark chosen one. They don't leave in rage. They leave in clarity. And when clarity moves, the universe follows. This is the moment we're in. Collectively, globally, cosmically. Many of us have already walked. Others are right on the edge, feeling the pull, feeling the silence. And I'm here to tell you, trust it. You're not abandoning your mission. You're completing it. You're not giving up. You're graduating. And the collapse that follows? It's not your responsibility to manage. You didn't cause it. You simply stopped preventing it. Let that sink in. How many things in your life are still standing only because you're holding them up with your energy? How many people, projects, communities are still functioning only because you're silently absorbing the dysfunction they refuse to face? What would happen if you stopped? If you truly let go? Not in anger, but in sovereignty. not in rebellion but in truth. This is the spiritual revolution no one talks about. Not the rise but the exit. Not the battle but the walk away. They taught us that power means staying, that loyalty means enduring. But what if real power is knowing when to leave without burning it all down? What if the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing except remove your light, your shadow, your presence from a system that never deserved it? And so we begin, not with fireworks, not with noise, but with silence, with stillness, with a step away from everything we were never meant to save.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
There comes a moment on the path of the dark chosen one where power no longer feels like something to carry, it becomes something you are. And that shift is subtle, almost imperceptible to the outside world. But internally, it's seismic. It's the moment you stop gripping, stop defending, stop performing. You no longer need to prove your worth, your knowing, or your strength. The weight of power dissolves into a kind of emptiness, but not the hollow kind, the sacred kind. The kind that can hold everything without needing to hold on to anything. That's the weightless crown. And only those who have walked through hell without losing their soul can wear it without collapsing. For so long we believed power had to be visible, balodi, heroic. We thought we had to earn the right to be free by suffering louder, healing faster, or fighting harder. But that was a distortion. Real power doesn't fight, it radiates. And only when you stop trying to carry power like a sword do you realize it was never about holding it at all, it was about embodying it. And embodiment doesn't strain, it doesn't clench, it doesn't seek validation, it simply is. That's the crown we wear when we stop needing to be seen, understood, or even followed. This is the paradox. The moment you no longer need to be powerful is the moment your power becomes undeniable. Not because you're dominating others, but because your presence speaks in a frequency that bypasses the mind. It moves through the body like truth. It recalibrates rooms. It dissolves lies. And people feel it, some are drawn to it. Others are terrified by it. But no one can ignore it. That's the power of the weightless crown. You don't wear it on your head. You become it in your stillness. And when the last dark chosen one walks away, this is the truth that descends upon them. They no longer feel the impulse to correct the distortion, to rescue the wounded, or to explain themselves to those committed to misunderstanding. Because they've seen the game for what it is, and they've stepped out of it. Not in defeat, but in mastery. They've realized that the loudest roar is silence, that the deepest revolution is withdrawal, that the most potent power is not the one that resists, but the one that transcends. But let's talk about what happens after you walk away. This is the part no one prepares you for, the void. The space, the silence after the battle. You're no longer fighting. You're no longer holding the system together. You're no longer absorbing the pain of others as your own. And at first, that emptiness can feel like loss, like grief, like disorientation. But it's not. It's freedom, pure, unfiltered, unfamiliar freedom. The kind your nervous system may not recognize because it's never felt it before. But that's the invitation. To stay in that space long enough for your body to recalibrate to sovereignty. And here's where it gets mystical. When you no longer need to hold power, life starts responding to you differently. People, places, and experiences begin to orbit around you not because you're chasing them, but because your field has become gravitational. You're not manifesting from desire anymore. You're receiving from alignment. This is the secret the system never wanted you to know. Once you stop feeding it your energy, you don't become weak. You become unreachable, uncontrollable, unprogrammable. Because there's nothing left to manipulate. You've integrated every shadow. You've released every false light. You've become whole. And wholeness doesn't need anything. It simply draws everything. So let me ask you something you may not have dared to ask yourself yet. What would your life feel like if you stopped holding power and started being it? If you stopped performing your strength and simply allowed it to exist in your breath, your posture, your choices? What would happen if you no longer needed recognition, applause, or even understanding? What would that kind of freedom unlock in you? This is where you begin to live not as a role in the system, but as a force of nature outside of it. Not a rival, not a savior, just a sovereign being whose very existence disrupts illusions. You don't need to speak. You don't need to fight. You are the transmission. And that's when the collapse accelerates. There's a moment so quiet it almost goes unnoticed when you decide, I'm not going back. Not to the roles, not to the cycles, not to the version of yourself that the world trained you to be. You make that decision internally, maybe even casually. But the universe hears it like a thunderclap. And that's when the gravity shifts. Not just around you, but within the constructs you left behind. Because when you refuse to return, you're not just leaving a system, you're removing the stabilizing frequency that kept that system standing. And when enough of us do that, the collapse doesn't just begin, it accelerates. We were the gravitational centers holding dysfunctional structures in orbit. Not because we wanted to, but because we were born into them. We came encoded to anchor light in the darkest timelines. We carried a resonance of truth so strong that even the most corrupt systems clung to our presence like lifelines, even as they rejected our voices. They didn't love us, they needed us. Because without our coherence, their illusions would start to crack. Without our patience, their chaos would spin out. Without our willingness to keep returning, to keep trying, to keep believing, they would have imploded long ago. And now they are. Because we're not going back. You don't need to make a scene. You don't need to announce your departure. You just stop participating. You stop explaining. You stop defending your choices. You stop lending your energy to systems that feed off your life force while mocking your wisdom. And in that refusal, you become untouchable. Not because you're better, but because you've become clear. And clarity is the one thing illusion cannot survive. This is the deeper truth. The old world was never afraid of our darkness, it was afraid of our clarity. Because clarity disrupts control. Clarity sees through manipulation. Clarity doesn't bend to guilt, shame, or obligation. And when someone walks in clarity, they become immune to the games that keep others trapped. That's what we become when we refuse to return. We become living reminders that another way is possible. And that's dangerous to a system built on dependency. Have you noticed how things start to unravel the moment you pull your energy back? Maybe it's a relationship that suddenly falls into disrepair. Maybe it's a workplace that spirals into drama. Maybe it's a community that fractures, or a family structure that collapses under the weight of its own unspoken wounds. You didn't cause it. You simply stopped stabilizing it. And without your unacknowledged labor, emotional, spiritual, energetic, the illusion couldn't hold. And still, the world tries to pull you back in. It sends whispers of guilt. It frames your exit as abandonment. It calls your clarity selfish. It pleads for your return not because it's ready to change, but because it's terrified to face itself without you there to absorb the consequences. But this time, you don't move. This time, you stay still. Not because you're cold, but because you're clean. You've remembered who you are. You've come home to your own field. And you know that every time you returned out of guilt, you delayed your own becoming. So let me ask you something raw. What are you still stabilizing that would collapse without your involvement? What part of you still believes you are responsible for holding up what was never yours to carry? And who would you become if you simply let it fall? This is the gravity shift. The moment you reclaim every ounce of energy you once gave away in the name of love, duty, or spiritual service. You're not abandoning anything. You're just no longer consenting to be the gravity that holds illusions in orbit. And when enough of us do this, when enough of us refuse to return, the old world cannot sustain itself. It begins to crumble, not because we destroyed it, but because we stopped feeding it. You are not here to rebuild what was never sacred. You are not here to be the foundation for the broken temples of ego and control. You are here to be the signal of a new paradigm, and that signal is strongest when you are silent, still, and sovereign. There is a silence so complete it feels like death. Not the death of the body, but the death of everything false. It's the silence that follows the withdrawal of the last dark chosen one. The moment when the final soul who was holding the system's energetic scaffolding steps away, not with rage, not with revenge, but with peace. That silence is not empty. It's pregnant. It hums. It carries the weight of centuries, lifetimes, dimensions. And in that silence, something ancient begins to stir, not the system trying to resurrect itself, but reality finally remembering itself. The collapse is not chaos. The collapse is truth erupting. It's all the suppressed frequencies rising to the surface now that we're no longer there to absorb and neutralize them. The pain, the delusion, the dependency, the manipulation, it all begins to scream, not because it's gaining power, but because it's losing grip. Without our presence, the system becomes what it always was, hollow, hungry, and unsustainable. But here's the twist most never see: that collapse is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the first breath of a reality that is no longer distorted by the illusions we were forced to uphold. We were never meant to live in a world where truth had to be whispered, where love was transactional, where freedom came with a price tag and authenticity was punished. But we tolerated it. We endured it. Some of us even tried to change it from within. But the real change didn't begin until we stopped trying and started leaving. And now, in the final silence, we feel what's real for the first time. The noise has died. The roles have dissolved. The masks have fallen. And what's left is us. We are not here to rebuild the ruins. We are here to build realness where illusions once sat like kings. But realness doesn't rush. It doesn't announce itself with spectacle. It begins like a whisper in the bones. A remembering, a breath, a noticing, I am still here, and I am not broken. That's the seed of the new world. Not a political revolution, not a spiritual performance, but a simple, grounded, sovereign presence that says, I exist outside your system. I am my own authority. I do not need to be saved, healed, or validated. That is the most dangerous and beautiful thing a human being can become. So we start again, not from the top down, but from the inside out. We begin with the body, with breath, with boundaries, with decisions made in alignment with soul, not fear. We begin with relationships built on honesty, not obligation. We begin with work that nourishes rather than depletes. We begin with silence that speaks louder than any doctrine or ritual. Because now we know we are the frequency. We don't need to channel it. We are it. And when we live that way, everything around us either rises to meet us or falls away. This is not about escaping the world. It's about ending the false one. And that ending is already underway. You can feel it. The institutions are cracking. The narratives are buckling. The ones who clung to power through illusion are scrambling. Not because we attacked them, but because we simply left. We left their games, Teiri Araxis, their false light and their empty promises. And now, in the wake of our exit, the real world is beginning to take shape not as a utopia, but as a place where truth has permission to exist. Let me leave you with this question. If the entire world were built upon your current vibration, what kind of world would that be? Would it be honest, free, intimate, safe? Or would it still reflect the compromises you haven't yet let go of? This is your moment to choose. No longer as the last thread holding the old together, but as the first thread weaving the new. We are no longer holding it up. We are now holding it open.